Hi guys, I Aziz welcome you to CoedMaster. Starting from this video, I am starting a new playlist and this is the first video of this playlist. So in this playlist, we will cover JavaScript output based interview questions that are frequently asked in front-end developer interviews. These questions test your understanding of JavaScript concepts and help you prepare for technical interviews with real-world scenarios. Whether you are preparing for a front-end developer position or just want to improve your JavaScript skills, this video will help you understand how to predict the output of JavaScript code and improve your problem-solving skills. So without wasting any time, let's get started. Alright guys, so let's start with the first example. So over here we have a function and here we are invoking this function. So let's predict the output of this function call. So you can take a pause over here and think about the output of this function call. Okay. So let me run this program for you. So here we can run example1.js and boom, we got the error. So the output of first log is undefined and the output of second log is reference error. Cool. Now let's understand why we got the reference error over here. So in order to figure out the output of this function, first we have to understand how JavaScript executes. So JavaScript executes in two phases. Number one phase is the compilation phase and number two is the execution phase. So compilation is the phase where the code is checked for the potential errors and the code is also optimized for the execution phase. And in this phase, the concept of hoisting kicks in. So when we execute this function, with the help of hoisting, the variable declarations are hoisted on the top of function. Let me show you how. So this function will become like this, and all the variables like where and let will be hoisted on the top of function. Okay, but there are certain difference between the where and let keyword. So when variable declared or initialized with the help of where keyword, it's gonna hoisted on top of function and will be initialized with the value of undefined. But this is not the case with let variables. Okay, so the let variables are hoisted, but it does not get initialized with any value. So when we run this program, we get the value of name as undefined, and when the console tries to log the value of age, it will throw an error. And there is a strong reason for it. So when we do a console.log age, the JavaScript engine is tried to do a RHS lookup. RHS lookup basically means that we want to get the value of a variable, and this time the value of this variable is unknown. So which is why we got the reference error. Here we also need to understand one more concept, which is a temporal dead zone. So when let variables are hoisted on top of function, so the area between the declaration of let variables till the initialization happens is known as the temporal dead zone. So when we try to access any variable within the temporal dead zone, we always get the reference error. So this is also one reason that we got the reference error over here. Excellent. So this is all about example 1. Now let's move to example 2. So now in this example we have two for loops, and let's see the output of this for loop first. So let's run example2.js. So here the first loop is giving output as 333 and the second loop is giving the output as 012. Now why we are getting this output? So let's investigate. So here in this loop we are using where keyword. Okay, and this loop is not inside any function. So the context for this loop is the global context. And we know that when we define or declare any variable in the global context, it gets initialized in the window object. Okay, so the for loop over here is same as writing like this. So where I is equal to undefined, and then we initialize the value of I with the 0, and where this I is stored in the window object because it is in the global context. So what happens when this for loop executes? So when the for loop executes, the set timeout function is going to be executed and it's gonna push this callback function in the queue, and which is the queue, and that queue is the macro queue. Okay, like this. And then in the second iteration and the third iteration, so all the three callback function will be pushed into the macro queue, and on the top we have a global variable, and the value of this global variable is 3. Why the value is 3? Because if the I is 0, then this condition is true. If I becomes 1, this condition is true. When I becomes 2, this condition is still true. And when I becomes 3, this condition becomes false. Okay, so the final value of I is 3. So far so clear. Now we know that the final value of I is 3 and all the 3 functions are pushed to macro queue. Now this is where the main thread of the event loop comes into picture. So what it does, it basically pulls out the callback function, the oldest at most one callback function from the macro queue, and it's going to execute that. So when this callback function will be executed, the value of I is 3, which is why we get 3 over here. Similarly with the second callback function and the third callback function. So in all the callback function, the value of I is 3, which is why we get 3 over here. Amazing. Now let's talk about the second for loop. So here in place of where keyword, we are using the let keyword, and we get the advantage of using let keyword over here. So in this case, as in the previous example, the I was declared in the global context, but over here, so here the I will get initialized in the block context, okay, like this. So here in first iteration, the value of I becomes 0, and then the value of I becomes 1, correct? And for third iteration, the value of I becomes 2, okay? And then in the fourth iteration, the value of I becomes 3 and the condition becomes false and the loop stops. So here you can see that all the 3 callback functions are pushed to a macro queue, but this time the I value is not initialized on the global context. Instead, it gets initialized in the block context, okay? So it is same as writing like this, that I is equal to 0. So in first iteration, for this block, the value of I becomes 0. Then for second iteration, for this specific block, the value of I becomes 1, and so on and so forth. And then again, the main thread of the event loop comes into picture. It's gonna pull this job from the macro queue and it's gonna execute it, and it's gonna print the value of I, which is equal to 0, which is why we got 0, 1, 2 over here. Amazing. Now we are done with the example 2. Now let's move to next example, which is example 3. Okay, so let me clear the console a bit. Now here you can see that we have one object and we are accessing the property of this object. Okay, so there are 2 properties. Actually there are 3 properties. One is radius, diameter, and parameter. So diameter is a function and parameter is also a function. The only difference is this is a regular function and this is the arrow function. Okay, now let's talk about the first log. So here we are accessing the diameter property of shape object, and diameter property is a regular function. Okay, so when we call the diameter property and invoke this function, it's going to return the value of radius into 2. Now the question over here is, what is the value of this? Okay, so when we execute any function or when we invoke any function with the help of any object, so for this function, the enclosing object is the shape. Okay, and we can also say that the object before dot is shape. So when we invoke this function, the value of this will bind to this object. Okay, which is why we are able to access the value of radius. And when we run this program, we got the 20 as the value of shape.diameter function call, right? So the value of radius is 10 and 10 multiplied by 2 is equal to 20, which is why we are getting 20 over here. Now on the other hand, when we call the parameter, even though the object before dot is shape and the enclosing object is shape, we are not getting 20. Instead, we are getting not a number. Now there is a strong reason behind this. As we can see that this is not a regular function, this is a arrow function, and arrow function does not have its own this. So it's gonna borrow the value of this from the outer context. And if you observe this, there are no outer context for this arrow function. It is inside the object, and for this arrow function, the outer context is the global context. And in global context, we do not have any property with the name radius, right? We have not defined any property with the name radius in the global context. So it will resolve into this expression. The value of this dot radius will become null or undefined. And when we do any mathematical operation with the undefined, we always get not a number. So which is why when we call the parameter, we are getting not a number. Wonderful. Now let's go to next example. And here we have two console logs. Okay. So let me run this example first. Okay. So here we are getting 1 and we are getting false. Now let's understand why we are getting 1. So in first console log, we are using the unary operator. So what unary function does, it's gonna convert the value of operand to a number. Okay. So here the true gets converted into number, and for true the number is 1. And similarly, if we had false over here, we get 0. So right now we have true, so that is why we got 1 over here. Now in the second log, we are using the not operator. Now this is a really interesting case. So when we use the not operator does two things. So first it converts the given operand into boolean, and then it's gonna inverse the value of that boolean. So here the value is, or the operand is the string, and if we have non-empty string, then it's a truthy value, and truthy value will convert into true. Okay, so in the first operation it will convert it into true, and then it's gonna inverse the value of true, which is equal to false, which is why we got the false over here. So far so good. So we are done with example 4. Now let's move to example 5. Now over here we have two objects, one is bird and one is mouse. Okay, now we have to find out which statement out of these three statements is true. So let's start with the first statement. Okay, so what we are doing here, we are accessing the size property of the bird object. So let's see, do we have size property in bird object? Right, we have. So in place of bird.size, it will resolve into this value, small. So now let's check, do we have a small property in mouse object? Yes, we do have a small property, and the value of that is true. So the output of this console log will be true. Okay, so let me run it and show you. So which means this statement is true. Correct. Now let's go to statement 2. Here we are accessing the bird property on mouse object. So do we have bird property on mouse object? No. So if we access any unknown property on any object, it always gives us undefined like this. And then we are accessing the size property on undefined, and this is again an error. So what happens when we run this? Let's see. So when we run this, we got the error as we expected, that it's a type error. We cannot read properties of undefined. Amazing. So let me comment it out and let's go to last console log. Now what will be the output of this thing? So here we are accessing the size property on bird object. So we obviously have size property on bird object, and the value of that is size. So it will resolve like this. Okay, and then we are accessing the small property on mouse object. So do we have small property? Yes, do we have? So it's gonna resolve into true. So let's see the output of this statement. Yeah, exactly. So we got true over here. So basically out of all of three statements, this statement, the first statement is valid, the third statement is also valid, but the second statement is not valid. Amazing. So this is pretty much all about these 5 questions. In the upcoming videos, we will see more such output based questions.
Alright guys, this is all from my side for this video. If you learned something valuable from this video, then please hit the like button in order to make YouTube algorithm happy. Please subscribe to this channel and don't forget to click the bell icon so my friend you never miss any upcoming videos. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.